I have a confession to make, some that will surprise some of you, some that won't surprise any of you. I've never been to Canton, Texas. There's another thing about that, I don't plan to go either. It's not for lack of begging by my wife. It's just that I see that as a giant flea market. And where there are flea markets, there usually are fleas. Somehow, I do know the concept that one man's trash is another man's treasure. However, usually the things I get home with, one man's trash is now my trash. And therefore, I don't want to go to flea markets. Somehow, I don't feel good when I collect things that don't have the value that they ought to have. Jesus knew the same feeling. Jesus knew that there were people in this world who, when they looked at the scope of their whole lives, in light of eternity, sometimes traded it away too cheaply. And they came out of this life with nothing more than a flea market faith. The stuff with no value. How does that happen to us? How do we take what is most precious to us and somehow just kind of give it away until it has nothing left? That's what Jesus wants us to understand. The story can best begin in 4 verses, told in Genesis chapter 25. It is the story about a barely older brother and his younger brother, the sons of Rebekah and Isaac. Esau wanted to go out hunting one day, and as he went out hunting, he captured his game, and any hunter knows that at the end of the day, you're tired and you're famished, and you probably lack a lot of discretion. And so when he came, Jacob is stirring a pot of bean stew, and the aroma assaulted his senses in more ways than one. He'd inhale, and it smelled so good. He could feel the rumble of his stomach. And so he turns to his brother and he says, "Give me some of that." And Jacob says, "What's it worth to you?" Is it worth, let's say, the birthright? You know, that thing that is going to make you head of the family, that's going to put you in the place of eternity, that thing that will give you more than you've ever had. Are you willing to, trade? And Esau said, "What good is my birthright going to do me if I have starved to death?" Sounds like a 3-year-old. And so it says, so Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew, and he ate and he drank and he got up and he left because he thought nothing of his birthright. Destiny changed over a single ladle of bean stew. Sounds pretty extreme, but the principle is there, the principle of exchange. We all make trades, we all make trade-offs. We do it in our lives. We trade our lives on an everyday basis. You don't believe me? The only way you have what you want to have is if you trade part of your life to have it. And you have to measure how much of your life you want to give away for that. If you wanted a top-of-the-line Tesla. I don't have one, so I had to look it up. But it's $124,000, an obscene amount of money to give to some guy in California. But if you wanted to do that and you had a $100,000 a year salary, every second of every minute of 443 days belongs to Elon Musk. That's what it'll cost you. Suppose you wanted to buy a $500,000 house, which is not as much as it used to be. It will take you 44,000 hours of your life to have that. We haven't even talked about your clothes or your furniture or your kids. How much life are you willing to trade for the things that you have? It's the best financial lesson a youngster can make. This is costing me my life, not my money. But Jesus had another expression. He said, well, what about your soul? Would you trade your soul? And we sit here in these nice, comfortable pews with the air conditioning running. We sing the songs of heaven. We read the Bible and we go, there's no way in the world I would ever trade my soul for anything. Are you sure? Because Jesus asked the question. And he doesn't ask questions if the possibility is not there. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, and yet he forfeits his soul? Or, what can a man give in exchange for his soul? Oh, the words of commerce drip from the page. To gain. When James in James 4, verse 17 uses that word, he means to get money, to go somewhere to a far country, and you accumulate a profit if you're a businessman. Forfeit. The ancients used this word to describe what you and I already know. If you were to go home this afternoon after church and you saw a really nice blue and white car behind you with pretty lights, and you stopped and the ticket was going to be $250, that's $250 you never get back. That's the word, forfeit. Exchange. Take out of my hand and give it to you. You give something else to me. Jesus says the possibility exists that we can exchange our soul. Now, why would he say that? What's the purpose of all of that? Because he's just got finished telling the disciples, there is a road that you're going to walk, that if you want to follow me, it's all about denying self, cross-carrying, and following whatever I tell you to do. And it's going to be hard at times. It's going to be taxing at times. It's going to be embarrassing at times. It's going to be deadly at times. What would you exchange for your soul? You say, well, I don't know if I would. What's the value of it? You see, Peter, standing there listening to those words, said, I'll never do that. But then there was that charcoal fire. And that unsavory question. Aren't you one of his? And for Peter, who never stumbled to have things come out of his mouth, stumbled to while he said, no, I don't know him. What's your soul worth? Or the rest of the disciples, when Jesus is putting his cross down and they're nailing him to that cross and dropping him in that hole on Calvary, where are they? They've run away. It's too frightening, too dangerous. What's the value of your soul? You see, that's a question that Jesus says every person needs to measure, because the principle of life is you give something to get something. You give up, you exchange value for value. If you're getting the value for your soul when you give it up, is that what you want to do? But see, it's not as easy as that. Like I said, we sit in these pews and we say, I'd never do that. Or we think in other ways that I would never sell my soul to the devil. Stephen Vincent Benet wrote a story called The Devil and Daniel Webster. I love the story. It's about a man named Jabez Stone, New Hampshire farmer who had had so much bad luck farming. One day he sat down at his table and he said, it may be worth selling my soul to the devil for a good year. And the next morning, Mr. Scratch, an old man, came by, knocked on his door. He said, I can make that happen. Sign here. He sold his soul to the devil. One stroke of a pen. Doesn't happen like that. The devil's more quiet than that. Peter in 1 Peter chapter 5 describes Satan as a crouching lion, making his way carefully and quietly through the paths and the grass to pounce. You never hear him coming. He's more subtle than we give him credit for. Paul was saying in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 11, there are the schemes of the devil. The word is strategy. He's strategic. He waits for the moment, and then he offers the gifts. He did to Jesus. In the 40 days in the desert, it's a hard time. You're deprived of food, water, company. You begin to feel like you've been lost, forsaken. No one cares who you are. So in Luke chapter 4, Satan comes to him. And he said, I'm sure you're hungry. You've got the power. Here's a few stones. Why don't you just turn them into bread? A little bit of bread's not going to hurt anybody, is it? And you may not be feeling like you're that important right now. He said, I bet if you went up to the pinnacle of the temple and you jumped off, you could prove to people that you were the Son of God, because God would not let your foot touch the pavement. And then Satan went down to his memory and the plan of God, and he said, oh, and remember that thing called the cross? You remember the pain? The day will come. Well, they'll lay your back open and you'll bleed. And it will be like you're being soaked in a fire. And you're going to have to die. I can make all that go away. One knee on the ground in front of me. I can make it all go away. Now, we'd say that doesn't appeal to me much. It doesn't have to. Satan knows what your problems are. And so he offers what we like. He offers now. We live in a world which wants speed. We want it yesterday. We want it right now. We look at 30 seconds on a microwave oven and tap our foot like, is it ever going to get done? And if you don't, your kids are. You will go out and buy every other year a phone that is far overpriced. Why? It's faster. That's why we do it. We like that. We like it now. We don't want to have to wait. If you tell your child, wait for Christmas, they'll go, is it Christmas yet? They'll drive you crazy. The devil comes and says, no matter what you want, let's not think about the future. Let's talk about what you like now, and let's do what's best for you right now. What he did with Jesus. You're hungry now. Let's go ahead and take care of that. On top of that, he says, let's make it easy. We all like it easy. We make it simple. And so he says, we'll make life easy for you. We'll make it where you don't have to suffer. Maybe you don't have to stand up for your faith. Maybe there's some things that you could do in place of that and still keep it. But you can be comfortable in this. You don't have to worry about that much. But he says, then you don't have to do it all at one time. Just one decision at a time, just one at a time. I remember when I was a kid, it was in a time where most people didn't have swimming pools in their yard. And I watched on television, and the salesman said, it's only pennies a day. So I decided to propose that to my dad. It can't be very expensive. Pennies a day. To which my dad replied, he didn't tell you how many pennies, and he didn't tell you how many days. See, sometimes things done over and over and over again accumulate to where the sale goes through later. That's what happened with Clay Christensen. Christensen is, best I can say, he's a hen in a fox den. He's a professor of business at Harvard University. Harvard's covered up the name of Jesus on their seminary. And so he's a stout believer in Christ. He always has been. He's also a great basketball player. And one of the things he did was he went to Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship. And he played basketball for Oxford. And they were one game from winning the championship of the British Isles. For England, it's like the NCAA final game. One problem. The game was on Sunday. He said, I made a vow to myself when I was young in life that I would never play basketball on Sunday. That was time for God and my family. So he went to the coach and said, sorry, coach, I can't play. The game's on Sunday. And the coach said, it's just a day, just one game. What difference does it make? Nobody will care. His teammates plowed on. Christian did not play, and Oxford did not win. But he says, if you ever compromise one time, you'll compromise every time. What's it worth for your soul? See, that's part of the problem with his equation. What is your price tag anyway? I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's the name on an office. Maybe it's a position in a company. Maybe it's a certain amount of money. Maybe it's the security that things give you. Maybe it's somebody you want to marry. What's the price of your soul? You have to fill in that blank. I can't. Every one of us needs to know what we would sell our soul for if the price were right. It's the only way you can protect yourself. Because the devil will come and he will give you the convenience, he will give you the comfort, and he'll give you the excuse. What would you give for your soul? There are decisions to be made. Sometimes they're hard ones. I remember one time I was studying with this lady, and we were plowing through the fascinating book of Exodus, talking about the very germane topic of, do you keep the Sabbath day of the Old Testament today? When suddenly she stopped me and said, I got to ask a question. I said, okay. She said, I have this restaurant. And the restaurant has a bar in it. And the bar makes most of my money. And my liquor license is coming due for renewal, and I don't know if I need to renew my liquor license. But if I don't, I have to close the restaurant, and the only place my parents can live is behind the restaurant. And so they'll be homeless. What should I do? Not exactly a Sabbath day question. Those are the kinds of choices that cost you your soul if you're not careful. But see, the day comes where at the end of things, payment becomes due. Do you save your life and forfeit your soul, or do you gain your soul and lose your life? You never know until due date comes, and it always comes. Because you can reach to a point in your life where you go, what I made the deal for is not worth it. But it may be too late. Think about Esau. A bowl of stew for some sort of ethereal birthright. The Hebrew writer says the day came afterwards, and we all know this, that he wanted to inherit the blessing. But he was rejected. Even though he sought it with tears. Because he could not change what had been done. There's the problem. At the end of life, you can't undo certain things of your life. So you struggle and suffer and regret. It was that way with Judas. Remember the story? We don't know what Judas's motivations were. Was he just trying to make the kingdom of God come faster and make Jesus act? Was he just trying to be a good Jew? Was he just greedy? Those are theologian questions. We do know what happened. When he saw what had happened, when he saw the evidence of his deal, when he saw Jesus being arrested, he couldn't live with that anymore, so he goes back to the temple. And he takes those coins, those 30 pieces of silver, and he says, take it back. They go, well, we can't take that back. It's blood money. It's blood money coming back. It's not blood money going out. He throws it on the floor, and his only avenue of escape is at the end of a knotted rope. Sometimes you don't get what you pay for. My mother loved to go to Juarez, Mexico. I don't know why. I hated Juarez. She'd take me to get haircuts, and I hated it because they were a nickel. And she liked to bargain, and we'd go to the market. Today when I go to Nicaragua, all I can do is smell Juarez. I hate it. I always knew what I wanted at the market. I wanted a bullwhip. I couldn't see anything wrong with a 9-year-old boy with a bullwhip with a 6-year-old brother. So instead, she bought a chalk bull. We hadn't been gone 100 miles until we had broken that bull. And it wasn't worth the money we paid for it. That's what happens in life. You end up with the pieces of something that's broken that you can't use. Or you get to the end of life and you have rejected all attempts. You have paid the price up front, and now you're going to get what you want. The Apostle Paul, as he sits in a prison cell, he could have thought back over his life, all the sacrifices he made. He was on the up-and-coming list of rabbis. He gave it up. He had comfort. He gave it up. He was stoned. He was ridiculed. He was shoved out of cities. And now he was in prison not because of what he had done, but because what somebody said he had done, but was not done, he had not done. It's easy when you're railroaded to be angry and bitter, to shake your fist at God and the world, say it's not fair. But instead, he looked through those prison cells, through those bars, and his only comment about his life was, for me to live as Christ, to die as gain. I got everything back at the end that I gave up in the beginning. There you go. That's what you got. You give everything up now to gain the future, or you give your soul away now and gain nothing later. So what do you do? See, the real tragedy is sometimes you get to the end and realize that you have nothing more than a flea market faith, bargained away at a cheap price. Leo Tolstoy told a story called The Land. It's a story about a peasant, a Russian peasant, who is promised that he can have as much land as he can walk around in a day. So he gets up early. He gets out there when the sun cracks the horizon. He begins to walk, and he takes a big swipe. He's going to get a big parcel of land. He's going to be rich. About noontime, he's not anywhere near halfway, so he quickens his pace. And as he quickens his pace, he begins to realize about 3 o'clock, he's getting farther and farther behind, and he'll never complete the circuit. So he begins to run, and the more the sun sinks, the faster he runs. As the sun drops down below the horizon, he collapses less than 500 feet from his destination. And as Tolstoy said, he got all the land he needed, 6 feet by 3 feet by 6 feet. Do you have a flea market faith? Jesus said, "What will you give in exchange for your soul?" Sobering question. Or you can ask every decision you make a simple question: does this help me follow Jesus? If the answer is no, the question is, and what will you give in exchange for your soul? You can clean out your closet one day of your life, and you can either find a golden crown or a flea market faith. It's always up to you, because it's your choice. It was for J.W. Tucker. Tucker was a Christian missionary in Africa in the early 1960s. He was in the Congo, and he lived a fairly comfortable life. He was doing fairly well, when one day the Congolese rebels captured him. And they told him, if you don't renounce your faith, we're going to throw you in the river that is teeming with crocodiles. One of his friends came to him, he begged him, don't go in the river, you'll never come out. And all Tucker said was, Jesus never asked me to come out of the river. He only asked me to go in. And that's all he's going to ask of you today. To take a step that says, I want more than today. I want God. I want future. I want Christ. And I want to be forgiven. Can you do that while we sing?